Proposition 129 would limit a citizens' initiative measure to a single subject and require that subject to be expressed in the title of the ballot measure. Tonight, we take a look at both sides of the issue. We're joined by Mike Bailey, General Counsel of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, and Penny Sharon, President of the Arizona League of Women Voters. Good to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Ted.
Mike, we'll start with you. Why is Prop 129 a good thing for Arizona?
Ted, single subject rule is a general principle of legislation that applies across the board. It applies to our legislature. It applies to any constitutional amendments we might want to make. And what it says is that if you're going to legislate on something, if you're going to pass a law on something, you can't hide things that aren't related to this topic. The principle applies in almost all state legislatures, and even those states that have citizens initiative systems like we do, most of those states require the single subject rule. So recently we've been seeing here a lot of special interests coming in and trying to hide things, and we think the single subject rule is an excellent antidote to hidden special interests in legislation.
Okay, Penny, why is this not such a good idea?
Well, I'll start by saying that, the Constitution says that we reserve the right for the citizens to enact laws independent of the legislature. So we don't think that this notion that it applies to everybody applies to the citizens. In fact, the courts have understood that the citizens have a much more difficult path to bring forward legislation. Legislators have a very simple path to bring forward many, many laws. Some of them are good, some of them are not good. So we don't think this is a good idea. We need to keep the legislature away from the rights of the citizens to have independently bring in laws.
For those who say that this would clarify a ballot measure and not confuse the voter, how would you respond to that?
I'll respond this way, Ted. If, in fact, it confuses the voter, they're not going to vote for it. However, just in this last legislative session, we had over 100 bills that were anti-democracy bills, okay? The citizens have only one shot at being able to address legislation that really harms them. And so therefore, it's important to understand that citizens should have that right to bring forward what might be a complex subject. They get only one shot.
Right.
And if I might add one more piece to this, and that is, who is to determine, what the single subject is?
Well, that brings up my next question. Critics say this will invite all sorts of legal challenges as to delineate subjects here. How do you respond to that?
There are already single subject legal challenges all the time from both sides. In fact, Penny's group, just 4 years ago in 2018, challenged Proposition 306 on a single subject rule. Now, they were on the other side of that petition, and in fairness, it was a referendum, not a citizens initiative. But we don't look at this again as an argument or tension between the legislative process and the legislature and the citizens' right we have here in Arizona to initiative process. It's a valuable right that we all have. It's just when we are confronted with something that is so complex. This year, for example, a ballot proposition narrowly missed having enough signatures to get on the ballot, but it had impact on 44 separate statutes in our state code, on 40 plus single issues that it said it did, something like 20 plus articles, chapters, and then 4 different titles in our state code. It would take an expert in the area of law days to figure out the ramifications of that, and it's not realistic. It's just too many things being hidden.
Is it best for Arizona to have all of these things in one initiative, whereas you might want X, but the rest of the alphabet you don't want any part of?
So it is, I think, important for citizens to be able to enact ballot initiatives. And if you look at what the courts have decided, that they do not put that single subject restriction on citizens. They've applied that to the legislature, but not, because they recognize that it's hard for citizens to bring forward ballot initiatives, and because they get one shot. That's the first thing. Then to directly answer your question about, should the citizens be able to bring forward multiple items? For example, the initiative where there are, it is, if in fact the citizens are responding to multiple legislation that impacts one broad subject, voting rights, okay, or access to the ballot, then it is not unreasonable for the citizens to identify multiple items, provisions that address this fairly complex issue.
Well, and I think it could also be argued that if it is fairly complex and there are a number of facets to the initiative, people know about that. They've already signed the petitions. They're apparently they're okay with it, are they not?
Right, and my point again is that they've signed what they understand, and always, of course, you know, many propositions have very appealing titles, but it's what's hidden that is the problem. And again, when you're talking about amending 44 separate statutes, there's no way to figure out how catastrophic or important it is. I do want to add, Ted, that the Citizens Initiative is very successful on the single subject approach. We haven't had the citizens of Arizona, when they see something they want, haven't had any issues getting that across. We recently had minimum wage in the past years, marijuana. This year, our friend has on the ballot a dark money initiative. These are all, you know, single subjects, or certainly arguably one or two. Again, the referendum that Penny's group challenged 4 years ago only had 2 issues, not 44, and even then they saw it as a problem.
Again, it's the argument on the other side is that it's unfair to ask people to consider all of these things. Does that make sense? I mean, do you understand where that point is coming from? Because it seems like you're asking someone to vote on, again, X, but they've got all this other stuff in front of them. You're saying what? That they would just vote no?
I think that people make choices at the polls, and the choices they make, they often have to make choices in candidates. Some they like, they don't like, and they make a choice and they vote yes or no. In the same way, when in fact the ballot has multiple provisions, and I would beg to disagree that it's sort of a kitchen sink and everything under the kitchen sink, the provisions are more often than not tied to one, you know, particular issue that is of importance to all of our voters. And I don't, you know, the issue of fairness will get determined in the polls, at the polls. You know,
Mike, does that make sense to you? I mean, if, again, we know about initiatives. People get confused. They just say no.
Right, and we think that happens quite a bit. I do think the candidates example is a good one, because we always have a choice between 2, maybe 3, sometimes 4 candidates, depending on how many parties have qualified. But we're never forced to vote a slate. And if you're forced to vote a slate, that's essentially what's happening when you have an initiative process that doesn't have a single subject rule.
Last point. This proposition would keep ballot initiatives simple and transparent. Respond.
No, will not necessarily guarantee any transparency, because you could have a single subject that has a particular title, and maybe even in the subject title, but the provisions that it puts forward might be far more complex, and it isn't all that transparent. We don't know necessarily, it isn't guaranteed necessarily that the impact on the voters is going to be easily understood, or in fact, you know, is transparent.
Mike, last point. This diminishes.
It makes it transparent, and it makes it much more difficult to hide special interest concerns.
But does it diminish the will of the people, as proponents,
Not at all.
say? Not at all?
Not at all.
All right, Mike Bailey, Penny Sharon, thank you so much. Good conversation. Good to have you both here.
Thank you, Ted.